Hello, welcome to my research into affect and New French Extremity, the aesthetics of traumatic memory. My research for this project was to look into New French Extremity filmmaking, a film movement that arose in the early 2000s in France and dealt with explicitly transgressive subjects and talked about the body in particular ways that I think are compelling in understanding how traumatic memory can how traumatic memory is communicated through embodiment and how film can formally communicate that through um, its aesthetic and formal tendencies. So, what I'm specifically looking into is how bodily experience is affectively contagious and how cinema as a medium can facilitate this communication through formal and aesthetic means, and how New French Extremity in particular is capable of doing that. My research utilizes neuroscience, affect theory, and embodiment psychology to gain a comprehensive understanding of how New French Extremity films created an aesthetic of embodied traumatic memory. So, through my formal analysis of these films, hopefully, I can understand better how traumatic memory is embodied and also how that embodiment is communicated on the screen. The two films I will be focusing my analysis on are Trouble Every Day, a film by Claire Denis made in 2001, and Martyrs, a film made by Pascal Laugier made in 2009. So, some of my findings are that cinema, as a medium, possesses the formal and aesthetic means to communicate a lot of complex affective relationships between characters, situations, and its themes. It is an ideal candidate for the study of affective trauma and how it is transmitted through those means because it is a very immersive medium that is able to communicate bodily experience in particular ways. For example, theorist Teresa Brennan explains how sight and sounds are physical matters and how those are carriers of social matters. Social, an important part of this because it kind of elicits the image of how affect is a social entity and how images then become social entities that are communicative of certain affective tones. Marx also goes on and elaborates how experience is communicated through attention to aspects that escape our symbolic recognition. So, our experience as a spectator is something that we can understand through things like formal readings and critical engagement in conventional senses, but affect theory encourages spectators to experience things and to understand their experience as a broader and less like conventionally cognitive experience. And film as a medium allows for form to transcend these conventional confines of critical engagement and instead encourages spectators to engage with their experience affectively and somatically. So the first film I'm going to talk about is Trouble Every Day, this film by Claire Denis, which follows the lives of two French couples, or one French couple and one American couple in Paris, where one partner in both relationships is affected by an illness that makes them crave human flesh. This creates a predator-prey dynamic throughout the film, and you see that this dynamic is framed through the fragmentation of characters' bodies. Their hands, their necks, and their mouths are framed in particular ways to position them as predator or as prey within the film, creating a particularly compelling affective environment that mimics kind of the traumatic experiences of the characters on the screen. The second film I did my research on was Martyrs, a film made in 2009 that's known as one of the most transgressive films in the New French Extremity genre, but also a very philosophical and complex film that uses concepts of sense memory, light, sight, and a haunting imaginary creature within its narrative to discuss an aesthetic of transcendental traumatic memory and how bodies can yield peculiar perceptions of the self and their body when under the shock of trauma. Logier's film takes on this concept and uses these motifs of sense memory and this imaginary creature and the embedding of traumatic memory through transcendental means. It utilizes these aesthetics to talk about how traumatic memory is something that can sometimes go beyond the body and yet is something that is communicated through the body. It teaches us a lot about how these experiences are remembered and ultimately how they can be shared through film. My conclusions show that New French Extremity utilizes knowledge about embodied traumatic memory and translates unspeakable experiences by reconciling this communications chasm between traumatic experience and spectators who are engaging with this experience. It allows for a more direct line of communication between ontological experience and storytelling. New French Extremity uses these particular features of filmmaking to highlight the subtlety of affective transmission, and specifically with respect to embodied trauma. Ultimately, the ramifications of this research are far broader than this movement, and they can demonstrate how trauma is experienced and how it can be shared through formal elements of art. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I would like to thank my faculty advisor, Andre Serrois, and Carl Riesner for believing in my project and supporting my work as a part of the Humanities Undergraduate Research Fund. And finally, Dr. Allison McGuffey for teaching me everything I know about film theory. Thank you.